Hello, Taurus. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to your new moon forecast, Taurus. This report is going to look at the main astrological themes for the Taurus sun, Taurus moon, Taurus rising person. If you have a stellium in Taurus, if you have progressions in Taurus, if you have strong draconic markings in Taurus, and even if you don't know what any of that means, but you know that you have a sun, moon, and rising in Taurus, this report or this forecast for the upcoming new moon on the 20th, which is, by the way, an eclipse, is going to be relevant to you. Or if you're here to understand how this eclipse season is going to affect that Taurus person in your life, this is also going to have some relevance for that particular motivation. So welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you. And as always, when you subscribe, you like, you comment, you share the content, you signal to the algorithm, AI overlord algorithm, that this content is indeed valuable and should be spread out to a wider audience so that other people can find Catalyst Energies and they can gather the same value and insight and guidance and inspiration that maybe you have. So thank you for doing that, and let's get right into it for the Taurus individuals. So of course, the eclipse on the 20th is a hybrid solar eclipse. I went all into the detail about that in the hybrid solar eclipse video. It's going to be linked at the end of this video on YouTube, or if you're on BitChute, Odyssey, or Rumble, you just got to scroll down. You'll find the eclipse video, and I really encourage you to check that out to get the general feel of this eclipse and this eclipse window. So we have a solar eclipse on the 20th. We have a full moon penumbral lunar eclipse, which means that the shadow of the earth that's cast onto the full moon is in the penumbra, so it's going to be very faint, and sometimes a penumbral lunar eclipse is mistaken for just a normal full moon. So the distortion will be there, as with all full moon lunar eclipses, but it won't be nearly as present as, say, a full total lunar eclipse where we're deep in the umbra of the Earth's shadow and you have this red moon. So, but still, it's still an eclipse. We still have this solar eclipse. It is in the last degree of Aries, so technically it's not a new moon in Taurus. But here's the thing, the nodal axis of the moon, which is how we get eclipses, again, you'll have to watch that video for that full explanation of how the nodes of the moon are responsible for the eclipses. It's not just the moon, but it's the position of the moon relative to the sun, relative to us, relative to the ecliptic plane. But since the nodes of the moon are in fact still in Taurus and Scorpio, this new moon is so important for the Taurus people, and of course the Scorpio people, because the full moon's going to be in the sign of Scorpio, so there'll be a full moon forecast, of course, for the Scorpio folks. But every time I do these forecasts, it's important to realize that when I'm doing them for the signs of the new moon and the full moon, you're always going to have a representation here to the essence of identity, right? The new moon and the full moon, especially in the rising signs, are related to the first and seventh houses. So Taurus, this new moon is going to affect you in your first house, in your sun sign, your moon sign, having to do with I feel, I express myself as, I am, if we're talking about the first house, which is where we always focus. So if you are new to astrology, for instance, and you are interested in looking at your horoscope, for instance, you would look your rising sign. This is the eastern horizon at the time and location you were born. So your ascendant is your rising sign, and you have to know your birth time in order to get a good indication of what that is. That's what you look at for a horoscope. That's how a horoscope is cast. A daily horoscope, a weekly horoscope, a monthly horoscope is based on your rising sign, because everything is then situated in your chart in the appropriate houses, and that's how the astrologer is able to come to forecast things for you. Anyway, so that's how I read these things. We're going to look at the Taurus rising chart, but if you are a strong Taurus, you're going to feel the reverberations of all of the things I talk about, because again, if you're a moon or sun Taurus, you are definitely going to have connections with the I am, with how I feel, the living soul, through the construct of Taurus, okay? So before we get started, just to share with you what's going on, especially because this is a new moon forecast. The lunar transit forecast is available for the Taurus people and the Scorpio people. So if you have Taurus or Scorpio, sun, moon, and rising in your natal chart, you have access to the lunar transit forecast sale. You would go to my website, linked in the description box, go to the bookings tab, you find the 30 or 60-minute sale, and you can book that, and you get the corresponding amount of time focused on the lunar transit. Now, I'm offering other stuff too. Of course, the eclipse season personal forecast is looking at the next 6 months in relation to your chart. So that is also available on my website. I'm going to keep that open until May 5th, the lunar eclipse forecast, because we are looking at 6 whole months here. So even if it's not right on the eclipse date, it's still covering such a large section of time that I'm going to keep it open until the 5th. Of course, I'm offering a 30% sale on everything else, excluding these 2 things, because these are already offered at a sale. But everything else on my site, you use a Catalyst promo code. It's open until Monday the 24th, this particular sale. Good time to take advantage of it. And also, I harvested a ton of white pine needle, and some of you may be familiar that it was very successful in treating the symptoms of COVID and any kind of respiratory, any kind of viral infection, basically, especially in the lungs, though. There's something about white pine needle that really acts as an expectorant and is very antiseptic, but it has more vitamin C than your standard citrus fruit. And believe me, when I open the bin of what I've harvested and dried out already, it smells amazing. So they're not going to be fresh for long. So if you're interested in getting a 1 ounce package, a 4 ounce package, an entire pound of it, you can also book or order that from my website. Free shipping. I'll send it off to you. There will be medicine coming, tincture and oil infusion with this coming in the fall, primarily, when I am able to actually be able to make that medicine. It takes time. So I just wanted to let you know all of the things that are available. And because starting on the 6th of May, I'll be gone completely off the grid, uncontactable from the 6th until the 15th of May. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, now is the time to book it, because I'm not going to be able to get back into the swing of readings and sessions and even shipping things until after the 15th, which is, about 3 weeks or so from now. So just wanted to put it out there, especially if you're interested in the eclipse reading and the lunar transit forecast. If you're like, I don't have that much money, but I really want to get an idea of what the next couple of weeks is going to be, you can book the 30-minute if you're a Taurus, sun, moon, or rising. So with that all being said, let's get into it. While everything is still very much fresh in my mind as well, in terms of the chart, I've been going over it since yesterday. I'm excited to be able to offer it. I do have a long-standing intimate relationship with a Taurus sun person, so I'm very familiar. I have tons of draconic markings in Taurus as well in my chart, so I love my Taurus people, and you're the salt of the earth. I mean, that's the reality of it. You are the salt of the earth, and it's been an interesting journey, I think, for the north node of the moon currently to be in your sign, Taurus, and for Uranus to also have been there, and for a while, really, for a number of years, honestly. And so there's so much change happening. But this eclipse in particular, considering we're looking at the last eclipse cycle in this axis of Taurus and Scorpio, this is kind of like a final act for the Taurus people in terms of initiating long-standing change in terms of identity and identity in relationship in particular, and at the soul level. So Taurus people, not only are you the salt of the earth, not only are you directly identified in many ways with the living soil and with the energetics of life itself, harmony, natural energetics, the currents, the ley lines, right? The nodes and the ley lines of the planet are very much related to the Taurus energy, the living soil, the actual structure of our reality. Not only are you identified with this in who you are, but we're all heading in this direction as a soul growth potential right now. And so you really are holding it down in many ways in terms of your own personal growth, evolution, and progression. So thank you, number one, for doing so. And number two, with Uranus in your sign still, I mean, the shifting of your own identity landscape, which is normally very situated as a Taurus person. I mean, you are very slow to move as a Taurus, and that's not a negative thing. That is just what it is, right? You're stable. There's patience. There is a sense of fixed nature that is dependable. Taurus people tend to be a little bit more traditional, and not traditional in like the Cancerian way where it's like family tradition. It's very traditional and conservative in terms of resources. So you're holding it down, but every time Uranus is aspected in some way, there is a shift or a potential to make a change in your very identity, which can be really difficult for a Taurus person. And if you're not a Taurus person, for instance, but you're watching this, then you know as well that when a Taurus person is finally moved to either change, move to anger, move to make any type of just moved at all, once that movement happens, there is so much force and momentum behind that person that once it's going, there's no stopping it until it's done, whatever it is. And so even with this eclipse coming and the Taurus people being really the boundary, the substantiation, and the territory of substantiation, it's like the Taurus people are going to be modeling in so many ways this entire eclipse cycle. And it's been the case since the nodes moved into Taurus and Scorpio, but just the nature of this eclipse in particular, and the fact that Pluto in Aquarius is now squaring this eclipse and is about to station retrograde, which, by the way, for the Taurus rising person, Pluto coming into Aquarius is coming into your house of profession, right? Your 10th house, your contribution, your career, your professional life. And so let me bring up the chart so we have some frame of reference here instead of me just talking at you. And some people enjoy that, I'm sure, but not everybody. So let's bring up the window there we go. Oh, and I took away your little glyph. I'm sorry. I want to make sure that you, there we go. We all know that we're talking to Taurus people here. So this is the chart for the eclipse itself, which is actually going to be this evening, Wednesday into very early Thursday on the East Coast here of the U.S. So we're just, maybe like 16 or so hours away from the exact eclipse. It is at 30 degrees Aries in the zodiac sign of Aries. But as soon as the moon passes, passes this point of the eclipse, it's immediately going to come into your sign and it's immediately going to square Pluto. So this is where we're actually going to start. And we're just going to tick down all of the major transits between now and that penumbral full moon and look at where the moon in particular is going to be transiting, which is all the bottom of your chart, Taurus. It's all about you, your individual identity, individual expression. That's what the bottom of the zodiac wheel, the astrological chart, represents. 1, 2, and 3 houses, individual identity. I am, this is mine, this is what I know, right? That's 1, 2, and 3. 4, 5, and 6, this is where I belong emotionally, but it's still individual expression. So your loyalty, your faithfulness to your family, your tribe, your clan, your nation. 4th house, right? Your inner power, your private life. 5th house, your heart song, your creative expression, which, by the way, as Virgo, this is something to pay attention to, Taurus. When we get to the point of this forecast where the moon comes into Virgo, this is going to be the moment where emotionally, in terms of your adaptability with the moon, you're going to start feeling into your heart. What is your passion? What is your self-expression? Because we're starting here in the I am. And the 5th house is where you express the I am. And there's going to be some oppositions, of course, with the stuff going on in Pisces, which has not been easy for the Taurus person in general to have, well, for all of us really, but Neptune and Saturn, both in the same signs, both on the opposite ends of the spectrum of Pisces, and to be in the 11th house for the Taurus rising person, it's simultaneously having to give oneself over to the complete dissolution of society as a whole, right? The civilization, humanity, and the 11th house is your community, your peer groups, your associations, your social networks, your church, right? If you identify in that way, whatever that 11th house is the group of one voice that is where your individual expression is truly realized, right? Because nothing is, we're not expressing ourselves in a vacuum. We're expressing ourselves in the context of a larger group of people or a larger network. And so to go through, Neptune has been in Pisces for years now. So it's been slowly but surely in its home sign of Pisces, just dissolving all of these links, all of these connections, or even your identity with these groups as well. And then Saturn here, of course. Saturn in not only in conjunction with Fomalhaut right now, but also is going to come into conjunction with Cygnus or Alpha Cygnus, and I'll go into that a little bit. And if you're a Cygnus starseed, you know you're a Cygnus starseed. This is really relevant to you, of course. But also Saturn is got that paternal aspect. It is the judge, right? It is the law of the universe. It is natural law. It is karma. It is the judge. And in Pisces, it is definitely divine judgment, karmic deliverance. And so it's like simultaneously living with the dissolution at a transcendental level, and at the same time also having to abide by the very firm judgment about what's going on here. So when the moon comes into Virgo, this is all suffice to say, when the moon comes into Virgo and opposes both of these things, it will really bring out, at least emotionally, and maybe a sense of moodiness, but we're talking about Virgo here. So this is a great time, Taurus, to really kind of pull within and get really disciplined about what it is that you are projecting in terms of your heart fire, your song, your authentic voice. And maybe it requires some patience, some dedication. I mean, all of these Virgo themes, right? Getting very organized and meticulous. And Taurus people, as they are holding the resonance of harmony and beauty and value, it's in the putting those things where they belong activity of Virgo that is really where your heart sings. And so, but that can be very difficult as you are in opposition to these very large, very powerful, very transcendent energies at the societal level. It can really just take all of the energy out of your own heart and be like, what's the point? Well, the point is that we continue to exercise dedication, discipline, prudence, patience, real focus on reconstituting ourselves. And for the Taurus person, it comes through being a creative person in some way, right? And Venus is your ruling planet, of course. So Venus is very much about the aesthetic beauty of creating art in all forms. And so, but this is the discipline of doing it, right? The practice of doing it, right? So if you're like a musician, for instance, it's in the practicing, it's in the mastering of this skill in a lot of ways that you really find your heart fire in terms of being, well, a Taurus rising person. So this is still going to be relevant to you as a Taurus sun or moon, of course, but this also shows you how I read the chart as well. So here we go. We have the moon. So we have the eclipse, and then the moon dips right into Taurus as soon as it happens. And so this is overnight, Thursday morning here on the East Coast, Wednesday night west of the East Coast time zone. If you're on the other side of the pond, for instance, it's going to be kind of coming into the early morning hours. The moon comes into Taurus and immediately squares Pluto. So there'll be another one of these squares with Pluto, and it's going to be when what are we here? It'll be Scorpio, right? It'll be the other side of things as we're getting closer to the full moon and when Pluto has stationed retrograde, because that happens during this time as well. So the moon comes into Taurus, and the first degree of Taurus is so beautiful. It's a clear mountain stream, right? You're just simply your own nature, and it does recognize a sense of natural resourcefulness. So you're already feeling this in some ways. The moon comes into Taurus and immediately comes into a square with Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius, which is really just dipping the toe, but certainly giving us an indication of how the everlasting sustainment, the enduring character of human achievement, and the power inherent in all of the great human works is just as subject to the destructive forces of the Grim Reaper, right? Of death. Pluto as the agent of metamorphosis. So even the things we kind of take for granted that are enduring, and the vision that's enduring, even that is subject to the metamorphosis of Pluto. And power is truly extracted from wherever Pluto touches. And so this has been very difficult, and we're not done by a long shot, obviously. Pluto's going to station retrograde on the 1st of May, and there's some interesting things that I've heard recently. And this is really related to Taurus people, because Taurus and the second house is inherent wealth, inherent value, currency in its own value. And there are things announced on May 1st that I think are really interesting that I'll link to those in different contexts so that I want to make sure I'm explaining it correctly. And so what I'm going to do is let someone else explain it. The point is here is that first square can lead to a lot of destructive behavior, because what happens is that buried feelings are exposed. So Taurus, the moon comes into your sign right after this eclipse, this hybrid solar eclipse, and which is a new moon, and immediately is hit with this block with Pluto, and it can be very difficult to control these emotions. So you may experience them in your dream state. And it may be very upsetting in terms of the subconscious, especially when we're talking about the moon and Pluto. This can be very subconscious, and emotional power struggles with people. But I would say within yourself, in terms of your professional life and your career, Taurus, are really going to be where the challenge starts to bubble up, because the sun is going to be also in a square to Pluto not that long after this. So you're getting the first taste emotionally of this struggle. And the challenge can really be turned into an opportunity to transform. And this is the beginning, Taurus, where you start to realize that your transformation is directly linked to this inevitable change in terms of your professional life, your mission, right? Your career, if you want to think about that. So conscious awareness really helps to deal with the dark side of humanity and allow for these transformations to eliminate bad habits, bad behaviors. And we're talking about you, Taurus, you as a person, the I am, the identity, right? Your ego in some cases. So there's already this ego challenge immediately with Pluto. And it's at this really subconscious and deep emotional level that you just want to be your own self, right? And Pluto in Aquarius is like, no, how are you going to, who are you? And I would say that Mercury stationing retrograde right after this and moving retrograde through your sign, it's going to meet the sun in a Cazimi during this time. You're really going to start reviewing who you are, like really thinking about it with Mercury in its retrograde. So right away, the challenge is here, and you may have some things that come up. There may be some really disturbing dream sequences. It might just be some really hard feelings. Some secrets may be revealed, but you can really do a lot emotionally and to your identity in a lot of ways, Taurus, with this, okay? Now, right after this is so this is still on the 20th, and what we're going to do is we're going to go forward, and we are going to look at how the moon comes into a conjunction with her own north node. So this is one of those moments here where we have a really powerful, and we all are going to go through this, but again, Taurus, this is coming right into your identity of who you are, how you identify yourself, and especially if you're a Taurus rising, how you project yourself into the world, how people see you. And 4 degrees of Taurus, where the moon and the north node, right, the trajectory of our soul, they come into alignment after this square, and really signifies, and I think sensitizes, the inner assurance which allows us to hold steady in any course of our choosing, right? 4 degrees of Taurus is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so, yes, there's this transubstantiation. There's a true incentive to being in life, right? You yourself can feel the incentive in your identity when you come into communion with your celestial, your divine self, with your connection to source, or to God. So there's a guarantee with this degree of a covenant between the individual and life. And so even if the challenges will present themselves either internally, externally, with the sun squaring Pluto, with the eclipse itself, and there's this moment of realizing and feeling that we are all being drawn in this pathway of being assured that we can hold steady no matter what course we choose, as long as we are identified, especially you, Taurus, identified with the covenant between you and life. And your identity is so wrapped up in the essence of life itself as a Taurus person that this isn't necessarily a difficult thing. Now, the downside to this degree in particular is that you have this futile expectation and just wandering off into pure fantasy land. That's the other thing. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and you get to the end of the rainbow and there ain't nothing there, right? That is definitely the negative side. So be aware of that. Be aware of the possibility that you could feel yourself getting pulled into this wandering off in quests of pure fantasy, because it's not, you're more focused on the incentive as opposed to the pathway, right? And I was thinking about it this morning as I was going over this, and I'm like, oh yeah, so Tolkien says in The Lord of the Rings, not all who wander are lost. He does not say all who wander are not lost, okay? There are definitely people who are wandering and they are lost. So don't take that as you can't get lost. You have to have the faith and the incentive, the communion with God or source, the assurance that if you hold steady, you're going to be able to reap those incentives. And this comes into your identity, into who you are, but you have to maintain that link, okay? So this is a very powerful moment, because this is about our trajectory at the soul level, all of us in our growth, okay? You're just holding it down in your sense of subjective I am for everyone to look at. Now, the other thing that is really useful on this day is that right after this, the moon then does come into right after it comes into a sextile with Saturn. And I just talked about Saturn in your 11th house and in Pisces, and how it's got this paternal judge kind of energy, the law of nature, the judge itself, the sands of time in the realm of Pisces, which is the realm of spirit, right? It is the realm of everything, and it is transcendence, it is forgiveness, it's unconditional love, but it's very paternal, and it very much has its foot down, and and the judgment is divine judgment. So when you have the moon in a sextile with Saturn, just in general, you certainly are going to get emotional maturity, a stability in your personal life, because what you're going to find here is that as you, Taurus, are identifying that there are things about you that are well on their way to being, on their decay trajectory, right? The widow standing at the open grave. There's already things here, Taurus, that have already gone into that grave, right? There's something that's already died. There's something that's already run its course for you in your identity, and you feel it. You are aware of it internally. It's subtle, but you are aware of it. It's going to become less subtle with the sun moving into your sign. It's going to become very obvious. But this sextile to Saturn, right? The 60-degree angle to Saturn that is in conjunction still with Fomalhaut, and that is a royal fixed star. It is connected to Archangel Gabriel. Everything has its has its sacredness, even the most mundane things, because either everything is sacred or nothing is. And this degree is everything is sacred, even those things that are not in themselves seemingly a spiritual type of event, for instance. Everything is sacred. And this is going to bring a sense of emotional maturity and stability into those things that you are maybe grappling with in your identity and you're still kind of grieving over and you haven't quite let go of yet. This transit right here, all kind of, like I said, wrapped up next to the eclipse and this conjunction with the North Node, which is what causes the eclipse. There's a stability here and an emotional maturity that's going to be necessary and that you can really take advantage of. And again, Saturn's in Pisces in your 11th house. So it's in terms of what's going on at the social level for you that you are identifying within yourself emotionally, that maturity and that sense of, you know what, even what's going on or what is already died within me or what has already run its course within me and my identity, there is something profoundly sacred at the social level regardless, right? And those things are related to each other. And I think that's been very difficult for a lot of people to really accept this. And this is why this North Node right now at this degree in Taurus has been very instrumental. And the connection to Saturn and where it's at has been really powerful if people are listening. If they're listening, if they are taking a sense of maturity and responsibility with Saturn, then they are hearing the message and embracing the judgment of the divine will or source or the universe, however you identify that for yourself. So then you can see here that the sun has already moved into your sign, 0 degrees of Taurus, and comes into that square with Pluto. Now, we already kind of felt it in terms of the subconscious, the feelings, and now with the square from the sun. Now, there's 2 ways you can go about this. You can either get a lot of motivation to start really struggling through those difficulties, achieving those goals when it comes to your career, your professional life, your contribution to society, whatever it is in that 10th house. And there's a tendency to be more assertive, sometimes controlling. Now you're going to see that there's going to be ego conflicts in terms of you and I am and being identified with that and what's going on in terms of what you are contributing to societally and how that influences you. Now you may be forced into a corner, right? And you may experience some real triggers that come up for fear of death, right? Especially talking about Pluto, but also abuse, persecution, or torture because of what's happening with Pluto in your 10th house like this. You may be subject to, or the perpetrator of manipulation. That also is going to possibly come up. So compulsive behavior becomes very dangerous if you don't know when to stop. And a Sun square Pluto transit is very much about this compulsive behavior. Abuse is possible in very extreme situations. I would say this has a lot to do, though, with you as a person in terms of what you've been contributing to, and the fact that Pluto coming into your 10th house like this or coming into Aquarius is like, I can just take even all of this out. And then what are you going to do? Transformation is very possible in a transit like this, and transformation at the identity level, Taurus, by sacrificing the need to be in control. And then you do evolve. Right? You don't want to, it's okay to feel triggered. I feel like that this eclipse is going to trigger an event that is going to trigger people into fear in all kinds of different ways. And Taurus, this is a great time to tap into your motivation, to your working hard, to that stability within yourself so that you're not pushed over and that you are assertive but not controlling and not trying to control through your identity, right? It's like when the bull sees red, there's no stopping it. And you don't want to get pulled into that dynamic necessarily with this Sun square Pluto, but you can have incredible transformation in this moment. There's so much potential for the transformation of Taurus, which doesn't happen very easily because Taurus is a fixed earth energy. So as we move through the day of the eclipse, the other thing that I want to bring up here is that the moon is going to meet it's going to meet Mercury. That's what I'm trying to say. The multitasking. Okay, so you can see that Mercury stations in your sign. Okay, it's going to station retrograde in your sign. It's almost going to meet with Uranus, which rules Aquarius, by the way, right? Ruling the sign that Pluto has now come into. So they're kind of, in a strange way, there is some connection there. But the moon will conjunct Mercury before, like, as Mercury is stationing. And when I say stationing, it pretty much is coming to a standstill in relation to our perception. It's not really, it just looks like that. And so Mercury is stationed, it's pretty much at a standstill at 16 degrees Taurus, and the moon meets Mercury. So this is a great opportunity to share feelings and to get something, especially if you have frustration about yourself or you are frustrated, to get it off of your chest somehow, right? You have a strong intuition and you can share your feelings through the vessel of Mercury, and you yourself can be more sharing. You can be more willing to get something off of your chest, right? Because there is frustration, especially this degree, because where we've been is not enough to confirm where we're going. And Taurus, this is again about you, where you've been, and especially as a traditional type of person, where we're going is not confirmed by where you've been, and there's frustration there. And so let it come out, right? Allow yourself to tap into your intuition about yourself and be able to get it off your chest, right? Because Mercury is now stationing and going retrograde, and you're really going to start reviewing who you are and putting that mental energy to that task. But in the meantime, if you don't even acknowledge your frustration about who you've been and where you're going and give it the space that it deserves, how are you going to make the most of this transit? So now keep in mind that emotional attachment to who you've been may cloud your judgment about where you're going. So just be aware of that. And if you have mood swings, it's okay. If moon conjunct Mercury, it's pretty normal to expect those. So maybe what you need to do is find someone to talk to. Perhaps you need to write it down or find some other way to express yourself. The important thing here is to get it out of your system. Because after this is when the moon, within a couple hours, the moon, and this is on Friday, the 21st, by the way, the moon is conjunct Uranus in your sign. And so there's going to be this subconscious impulsiveness that gets triggered, that's going to be like airing out an old bag out a window, right? Sudden changes. Flashes of insight, take them seriously. When the moon and Uranus are coming together, those flashes of insight, those sudden changes, those intuitions and instincts, take them seriously because they're actually giving you insight into something. Again, don't hold yourself back from expressing yourself. You may feel somewhat detached from people in this moment. Maybe you expressed yourself and you're just like, I'm so frustrated, no one understands me. And some people might think you're being really weird or eccentric. So if you're feeling a little isolated from people in your relationships, it's okay. Just, give yourself the space to express yourself. And maybe you need to just scream into your pillow. Maybe you do need to journal. Maybe you need to just go free association on your Instagram, whatever it is. And especially if you feel the impulse to do it, don't squash it. But the other thing about this is that as the identity is being aired out through the shifting landscape of Uranus and Taurus, you may find sudden changes in your relationships, and it's going to be upsetting. There may be significant changes, especially if you've expressed your frustration outwardly to that person in your relationship. Even if it's about yourself, there may be sudden changes, but it's airing something out in terms of the identity. Okay, so as we finish, I really want to focus on the moon in your sign in particular, and then we're going to kind of generalize it then moving through the rest of the first 2 weeks, right? Basically the waxing period of the moon. So Now, Venus is in your second house. Venus is your planetary ruler as a Taurus person. She is in your second house. Her perceptions in Gemini and in the second house, she gets very possessive in the second house, right? She is very magnetic, and her magnetism in terms of perception, right? She's holding that very close to her. She can get very possessive. And so you may find yourself getting very possessive over your ideas as if they are actual, and they are to you. They are actual currency. Your thoughts, your knowledge base, your ability to learn is all an asset to you. And so she may have been very possessive about this. Curiosity in this realm is your best friend, I would say, with the Venus in Gemini. So, and we'll get there because the moon meeting Venus is going to be a breakthrough moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I can actually talk to somebody. Jeez. So in the meantime, though, the moon's going to keep moving through Taurus. And by the way, 0 degrees, 6 degrees, 10 degrees, 12 degrees, 14 degrees. Each of these fixed stars are in the Andromeda constellation. So this whole time, the Andromedan starseeds are going to be activated, at least emotionally and subconsciously, by the moon moving through that constellation. So if you know you have Andromedan starseed markings, then this is going to be even that much more powerful for you. Now, the moon will then come into conjunction with the Pleiades, starting at about 24 degrees Taurus, and is then going to make a sextile over to Neptune. So we have this other connection to Pisces and the 11th house going on during this time. We're still on Friday the 21st. This is a jam-packed time for the Taurus people with the eclipse and Mercury stationing retrograde in your sign. So this sextile with Neptune, as the moon is pretty much in conjunction with the Pleiades, in conjunction with Algol, right, the fixed star that is the head of Medusa. It is not a good omen usually in fixed star astrology. That Medusa is, the head comes off, and it's not like she wanted her head to come off, but she was, just like everyone else is trying to survive. It's just that what's on the surface is everything that is everything, including the trauma and the vitriol and the venom, right? We're talking about Medusa. So losing that is a release. And yes, there is the inevitable bereavement over those things, and that fixed star in particular, people that have that tend to be drawn towards bereavement counseling and death doula type of energy, and also of course Pleiadian starseeds, right? And not to get too much into that in particular, but if you know you have that, this is going to be a big deal. And the sextile with Neptune and Pisces in particular. So you have Neptune and Pisces, super powerful. It's at home. Moon in Taurus, exalted, really likes being in Taurus. These come into a 60-degree angle that is a transformational moment if you participate in it somehow. This requires that you are able to adjust to the needs of the whole through your identity, right? And the needs of the whole have a lot to do with the consummation at a societal level with, basically the harvest. We are reaping what we have sown and cultivated. And it's all come to that moment of consummation with Neptune and Pisces. And there's nothing that we can do about that. Neptune and Pisces is huge. It's transpersonal. It covers large sections of people, large tracts of time. It is at home in Pisces. Everything returns back to source when it's dissolved down into its essence. And that's what's happening right now, is the harvest. Taurus, in your own sense of self, in your identity, and emotionally, in the living soul, it is about adjusting serenely to the vital needs of the whole. And maybe how that's going to look for you is going to be different than other Taurus people. But a sextile to Neptune does make your intuition stronger. It makes you much more sensitive and emotional. You feel all of the feels, and the best case scenario here is to be around those people. And 11th house, that is the company of people, being around those people who are pleasant, who are cultivating and reaping something nutritious and something that is of value, right? Something that is actually going to be an asset to the society. You want to be around those people because your intuition is really strong and your dreaming is very vivid in your imagination, and you can give lots of tangible form to whatever vibration. So if you're feeling all the feels and you're around a lot of negative people, you're going to be pulling that energy in and basically you being transformed by that energy. So your best case scenario here is to be around other people who are harvesting, they're harvesting the good crop, right? That they have sown the good seed, they have cultivated it lovingly, and now they get to reap it and harvest it in a way, and it's good, right? I mean, and accepting what it is. But this will require a sense of, like, you have to chop off that sense of toxicity within yourself. And that's going to be different for everyone, but this is one of those moments that you're going to be able to feel the difference big time with Neptune and the moon in a sextile. So, make some good choices here. And if you are feeling all the feels of the negative, then this is a good opportunity to tap into where you'd rather be, right? Because then Mercury stations retrograde, like actually starts moving in its retrograde pattern after this. So when we come into Gemini, one thing to keep in mind here as we go through the weekend is that the moon in Gemini in your second house, right? You're going to be so much more emotionally sensitive to what is yours, what is your value, what is worth, what is your inherent material resource, what is yours, basically. It's going to make all the same connections Venus did last week, right? Venus being your planetary ruler, so it's going to trine Pluto, it's going to square Saturn, and what I see here is that the things that influenced you directly in your relationships, through your senses, are going to be so much more emotionally and intuitively accessible with this moon trine Pluto, this moon square Saturn, that is going to bring up those same experiences, but now you actually get to experience them at a deeper level, access the subconscious, probe the feelings of yourself, undergo actual regeneration and transformation. And even the square to Saturn, you may feel guilt or shame. You may be reminded of that Venus square Saturn that was pretty intense, right? And you're just like, wow, I feel so much like sadness and loneliness, and feel so separate from the people I love and care about. And the moon is going to maybe bring that back up again, but this will be that moment where you get to take responsibility for your emotions and actually get something out of it, like ending an unhealthy or codependent relationship, or maybe letting go of those unhealthy and codependent relationships societally in order to start really making change within yourself, okay? And making change within what is yours. That's the other thing. We're talking about your second house right now. I love this conjunction with Venus, I'm not going to lie. So when we come into Monday the 24th, but even before that, Sunday the 23rd, you're going to see that the moon and Venus, your ruling planet, come into this conjunction in Venus. And this is such a lovely moment of harmony and peace in your actual physical reality around you, what is yours. And both of these things are so important to you as a Taurus person, your planetary ruler and the moon being exalted. They come into conjunction in Gemini, where you get to actually exchange information through your intuition and your sense feels and your sense of curiosity and discovery. You're going to be like, oh, and actually objectively exchanging information, either with people in your lives, depending on, where this is happening for you. But as a Taurus rising person, it's going to be in terms of, the different aspects of what you're tapping into that is yours. Definitely a harmonious moment and a sharing of data about what is valuable, what is resourceful, and what is yours, right? There's going to be this exchange, this objective exchange in Gemini, where these two things are going to come together. And even the sextile to Chiron, right, as well on Sunday, is going to be one of those, and we're going to talk about Chiron and Jupiter still being in the 12th house and being in Aries, because there are large spiritual and transcendent, unconscious types of experiences that are still sources of pain and trauma and a sense of wounding with Chiron, and also with Jupiter, just holding the big picture of these types of dynamics are still very present. But now that we're moving into Taurus and Gemini, they're still there, and there'll be plenty of opportunities along the way that this is going to be brought back to our attention. So even the moon in a sextile to Chiron is there's this moment of kind of like mental maturity that can really happen as a result of this connection to Chiron. I feel like there can be a big healing moment where we kind of, grow up a little bit in terms of what is around us, what is ours, maybe spiritually and karmically letting go of this kind of narcissistic, like, I'm just going to keep it all to myself, or the other side of things, karmically letting go of or becoming aware of the necessity that we can't just keep it all pulled in, but we also have to be able to still maintain that potency within our own spiritual life, within the unseen realms that is the 12th house, and in our own seed point, right? There's this sense of maturity that I feel like, mental and emotional maturity in that moment that's going to come around. Now, this is also Mars. Now, Mars is in conjunction with Sirius. Mars is in the third house for the Taurus rising person. If you are the soil, the third house, your mind, your consciousness, your ability to learn, and what you know is the actual root system itself. And so Mars has been digging deeply into this area, pioneering new ideas, charging forward into brand new mental territory, but it's going down deep into the sense of power, personal power in this area. So when Mercury in its retrograde is in a sextile to Mars at this point, again, Sunday, there's just this drive to succeed at something. There's a strong sense of purpose. You can be really direct and honest in this moment, and enlist the support of other people. Now, Taurus, we are dealing still with you and you, right? Who you are. And certainly with the moons in Gemini, your intuitive sense of, what is yours, and then the sign of the moon, which is Cancer, which is what do you know, right? And so these two coming into sextile, Mercury in your first house, Mars in your third house, this is a good time to be direct and honest. You may not speak it out loud because Mercury is in its retrograde now, and there is still this kind of frustration, but at the very least, you have Mars actively attempting to find a pattern of integration into what's right in front of you. Okay. And you're more willing to take some bold action, and maybe you're not entirely taking the action, but what is that action? It might be an internalized moment of studying what's right in front of you and attempting to integrate yourself into it, just like looking at a mandala, right? And so this is also a really good time to finish things that you've previously put off. And with again, Mercury in its retrograde, there may be some stuff around you and your own work that you really do need to start paying attention to. And Mars in conjunction with Sirius is like, okay, right? This is a permanence here to life and stewardship and custodianship of life that you can act on. So that's really, Sunday is really good. There's a lot of really helpful transits on Sunday. Now we move into the 24th. Let's see here, which is Monday. And we're going to see the moon start moving into her home sign of Cancer. And so this is where the sun and the North Node are in a conjunction with each other. So remember when I talked about it in terms of the fourth house, or the moon here, when the moon and the North and her own North Node, right? It's subtle, but it's powerful emotionally and intuitively. Now it's just illuminated and fully identified with. Oh, I'm fully identified with being the widow at an open grave. Like, you're just going to accept this part of yourself and realize that it's in the discarding of the past that is already gone that you are able to start moving forward. So this is going to be one of those moments too that the Taurus person is fully identified with where we're all being led in order to evolve right now. And I just get the sense that Sunday into Monday and even moving into Tuesday is going to be this kind of confirmation of what it is that we are attempting to do, and certainly for the Taurus person, how the Taurus person is identified and how they're growing in terms of their own subjective experience. So, like I said, there's these two come into conjunction on the 24th, and it's when the moon moves into Cancer is this amazing kite that comes into view, and it's the moon in Cancer in a trine to Saturn. I mean, you can see the kite all around, and the spine of the kite is the nodal axis, and the sun too, the sun opposite of the south node. So the sun's involved at the top of this kite. The nodal axis in the first and seventh houses for the Taurus rising person are, in fact, the spine of the kite. This is what gives it its structure, and everything surrounding it is either harmonious or opportunities for transformation. And it's Saturn, it's the moon, it's the sun, and it is the nodal axis of the moon, all in relationship. I love kites. They are really powerful opportunities to make the most of what otherwise is just this tense opposition between 2 points. And you fly, right? That's what a kite does. It flies. So now, the moon moving into Cancer and making all of these connections, there is a sense of wanting some outer acceptance for what we're starting to feel. And of course, this is the third house for you, Taurus, Taurus rising. So it's not only just what you're feeling, and believe me, your intuition is going to be really strong and sensitive with the moon in Cancer, but it's looking for patterns, right? This is the third house. This is, again, conscious awareness. This is what's right in front of you, your environment, your communication, your expression, your back and forth, right? This is collecting data is what happens in the third house. This is the back and forth, the conversation, the learning, the language, the grammar. The logic and the reason is all third house, but for you, it's all emotional. So, and that's not to say it's negative. It's just saying that it's your situational awareness is very intuitive, Taurus. So you're looking for outer acceptance for these inborn kind of energies and confirmation for the values that you've kind of come to on your own. And I think that where you're really going to find it here has a lot to do with this trine to Saturn in particular, which is because there's a patience and emotional strength here that to handle a very difficult situation that is going to be presented with this kite, right? Which is, I think that there is this acceptance that you can't keep going against the grain of these patterns in what's right in front of you. It's almost like you're ignoring your intuition about something that you know is already gone within you, and you keep trying to like go back and pit yourself against what is already well on its way. And this trine to Saturn as part of this kite is going to give, I think, the emotional strength to handle that very sensitive issue. And a moon in Cancer is very sensitive. And it's like your car's stuck on the railroad crossing or the railroad track, and that train is coming, right? And you're just like, oh, I'm going to like start my car, or I'm going to push it off. And it's like, no, you're going to get out and you're going to let that happen. And you're going to realize that you have to adjust yourself karmically in this moment. And it's the trine to Saturn, which I think is going to be very useful in this moment of Tuesday, right? I mean, this is the changeover from Monday to Tuesday here on the East Coast. So you may find some incredible dreams depending on where you are. But it's most likely going to have a lot to do with your relationships, obviously with the South Node in your 7th house, but relationship to society as a whole and what it's going through and how you are changing in relation to that. Now, another sextile that's going to transpire during this time is, as the moon is getting very close to Mars, is that it's going to come into a sextile with Mercury retrograde in your sign. So another one of those, and also the moon will be conjunct Sirius. Now talk about some power, right? Talk about some shamanic power. Geez. This sextile with the retrograde Mercury is allowing you to be in tune not only with your own feelings, but with the other people's feelings. And yeah, you may be in the mood for kind of chatting or talking or socializing, but I would say too, with Mercury in its retrograde, that it may be more about the materialization of what you are feeling coming out and really materializing. Truly, it's materializing in some sort of adversity towards your identity, right? And so maybe the socialization or the mood for talking isn't going to be necessarily that outward as much as it puts you in the mood for tapping into your own feelings. Maybe you are tapping into other people's feelings, and you're taking that information and you're processing it through you internally, right? And that's the thing about Syrian starseed nature, is very insular. Right? Very insular, sizing people up energetically, making sure that what people are presenting themselves as are the truth, or is the truth, right? Because there's a necessity to protect, to be loyal, to consolidate power. And the shaman, for instance, right, or Syrian starseeds, and for those of you who are, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because people think you're just shy or that you don't know what to say, and really what you're doing is you are energetically sizing everything up. Talk about situational awareness, and it is tapped so deeply into the core of life itself that there is no bullshitting this person, truly. So maybe you are kind of coming into that awareness, and there is adversity that you are having to kind of internally process that is the result of something materializing within your own immediate environment that you are intuitively picking up. Right? And maybe you're hearing people, maybe you're picking up on energies that are really testing your character, and you have to actually start doing something about that. Or at the very least, you're having this internal dialogue with yourself about who you are in relation to what you are feeling. And then the moon comes into conjunction with Mars on Tuesday, and you may feel like you need to do something about it, and you will have courage and enthusiasm and initiative to act on this. And again, this is in your immediate environment, in your expression, in your learning, your knowledge. So then you have this initiative to do something about it. So to actualize your potential. This has nothing to do with anyone else as much as your potential. So be very aware of what you are picking up on in this earlier, so that when the moon and Mars come together, you have the courage, enthusiasm, and initiative, and you know exactly what you're acting on in terms of what's right in front of you, your knowledge, your immediate environment. Now, the sun is also going to sextile Saturn, and that was part of the kite, really. And again, patience, perseverance, a strong work ethic. This is a really good time to meet goals, and we're talking about you, Taurus, the sun in your sign. So and you're very determined to get practical results, and maybe just taking this whole Saturn and Pisces thing, just taking it for what it is and being more mature about it, and in terms of you and your identity as well. And so you're determined to get practical results, and so you are going to work at it, right? It may take a little bit of effort, but there's perseverance and a strong work ethic here, and there is advancement that's possible, especially if you have Sun or Saturn in your 10th house, or if it's currently transiting your 10th house, for instance, Sun or Saturn. You really could be feeling that advancement in your professional life. But I would say in terms of identity, it's really just about coming to terms with and really having patience with how you're changing in relation to what's happening at the societal level. And then Venus comes into a sextile with Chiron, I think, is going to be one of those kind of insulating moments here where Venus, I think, is really going to get very possessive over the people and the ideas and the environment where she is understood and where she is insulated, right? You may find yourself kind of insulating yourself from, what is going on that is kind of foreign or alien to you outside of you. And that's going to, Venus is your ruling planet, and it may be relationships. It may be your projects. I get this sense that there's going to be kind of this firewall energy that's going to come about, and it's going to, hopefully what it's going to do is, with Chiron in the 12th or in Aries, is going to allow for a rhythmic kind of experience in terms of the spirit, in terms of the one's karma, especially with a Taurus rising with Chiron in the 12th, right? That there is still rhythm happening and the hammock is swinging, but you may be finding some rest and recuperation. I get this firewall thing happening here, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the thing. You do have to participate in doing it. It's not going to happen naturally without any participation. You're actually going to have to find that way to insulate your resources somehow, so that you are not like guilted into spiritually just going and going and going and going, right? There's this firewall thing, and it's going to be interesting how that unfolds. So it's the first quarter moon on the 27th that is really going to, it's really going to kick off some shit. I'm not going to lie. And so everything leading up to this point, Taurus, is kind of this new moon into the crescent, into the first quarter that is like, okay, we're going to start, it's really impulsive. It's organic. It's not necessarily something that you have to actively do. It's when you get to the first quarter square that you start realizing where the boundaries are, where the challenges are, and what you have to do about it. So in the new moon to first quarter phase, I mean, like I said, it's a subjective. It's not distinguished. The internal subjective experience is not easily distinguished between the inner realm and the outer realm of reality. Now, Taurus, you are outer realm of reality, the salt of the earth. So this is not necessarily as hard for you, I think. So there's the releasing of these vital energies throughout the entire lunar cycle, but right now it's very spontaneous, impulsive. It's not a lot of trying, it's just a lot of being and experiencing. So once this first quarter moon in Leo, right? And so now the moon moves into your 4th house. Wow, it's, and it's going to be in Leo. So talk about combust energy that's going to be in your private life, your personal life, your personal power, very sensitive to this combust energy. It's going to get really interesting. So let's look at that. That's going to be a big deal, I think, personally. So it doesn't matter if this is your 4th house. The square is still square to you, Taurus. Leo is fixed fire, and it's in square to you no matter what. So let's see what's leading up to this point. Well, obviously the moon comes into Leo and immediately comes into opposition with Pluto. So that's going to be very relevant later down the line when all of the Sun and Mercury and Venus and Mars all come into Leo. They're all going to be opposite Pluto in their own way. So this can cause a lot of inner turmoil in relationship with the moon opposite Pluto, experience dramatic mood swings. It intensifies feelings where it's so difficult to control. You got the blood rushing to your head, and it's something that you feel very intensely. You are vulnerable to being emotionally manipulated, or you are being the manipulator because your power is getting so amplified in this moment, and you may be tugging on people's emotions, trying to manipulate them, or especially at home and family. The moon in the 4th house for Taurus rising people, be very aware of this. Try not to react based on your strong emotions, though, because they're very hard to control when the moon is opposite Pluto like this. Find a healthy outlet for these feelings rather than using them as a weapon to control people, because you're going to see it and you're going to feel it, and you may be one of those people that does that, right? Remember what I said, Taurus people, once they get moved, it is really hard to get them to stop moving. They're not going to stop moving until all of their energy has been expelled. So the big point about this square with all first quarter squares is a relational crisis. What am I going to do? Here, let's go back here. What am I going to do? because you have to start creating the mechanisms and the vessel in some ways to fully receive the full moon illumination without any type of boundary. Well, I shouldn't say boundary. You don't want any obstacles in the way. And this is going to be that first real strong obstacle in relationship. Definitely in home and family for the Taurus rising people with the moon in your fourth house. I mean, it's going to be very sensitive, very deep, and also very combust. Okay, we're talking about Leo here. So leading up to and at the first quarter moon is, first of all, the sun in Taurus will be trine Alpha Draconis. Exactly. So if you're a Draco Starseed, you know you have that, and you're also a Taurus person, this is really going to bring that out in you as well. And there's something about expectable conditions in your identity that this degree has a lot to do with, right? The sustainment and the value of anticipating and preparing for expectable conditions. I would say if you have an insight into this now, you can already start planning for this. So the alignment of the self with whatever greater possibilities are unrealized. And those greater possibilities that remain unrealized are going to start being felt very powerfully at this moon, okay? This first quarter moon. So if you're just like, tolerating your frustration and not taking it seriously, and you just have this vague hope of like, oh, it'll be better, this is going to throw you for a loop. And you may find yourself getting into this futile ranting in this moment. But if you realize that there is a need for all of us to have a cause in which to rally behind, and you are determined to share that vision, either with the people you're closest to, with the people that you are identified as like home and family, for instance. And if you're determined to share that vision in a way, this is a really powerful moment, right? You're going to start feeling the power of this, so that when we do get to the full moon, which is going to be in the sign opposite of you, it's going to be you in relationship, that it is actually going to be fully revealed in terms of who you are and who you're becoming. Because this is going to be this is going to be very powerful. Like I said, it's either going to be futile ranting at people, and it's really going to challenge you because you just want to stay in this sense of like tolerance and alignment with yourself. But if you're aware this is coming and you are determined to share your soul's vision with the people closest to you in a way that can have a real impact, this is going to have a real, like, you can anticipate this within yourself and prepare for it. I mean, it's one of those types of first quarter moons where the degree of the signs that it's in are actually setting you up to be like, hey, you can prepare and anticipate these changing conditions. And that way, when you get to this really sensitive place with the moon in Leo, it's so combust and it's so fiery and passionate that you can share that vision and not have it just destroy your relationships, essentially, right? Or just, get into that cycle of ranting about shit and not doing anything about it, right? Because you're not actually willing to allow change to happen within yourself. That's the other side of it. And I think some people are going to get really shocked that people are done listening to their nonsense. And they're like, what are you going to do about it? I'm so tired of listening to you complain about things or yourself. What are you going to do? So this first quarter moon is going to bring this up big time. And then you're going to have Mars square Chiron at the same time. And it's going to be like, not only what are you going to do about it, but what are you going to do about it? Because you're going to have to start fulfilling your responsibilities, providing for the immediate environment around you, and meet the demands of existence. And you have to fulfill those persistently. Now, Mars is great at this, right? And putting that energy out there and taking initiative and actually meeting that demand. The square to Chiron is going to be like, oh, you're just going to like sit in the hammock, spiritually and just not do anything, right? That's one side of it. The other side of it is that you feel very guilty about taking time for yourself, and Mars is going to be like, you just got to go, and you just got to go, and you just got to go, and it's all about, the family, and it's all about what's right in front of you, and you don't take care of yourself, and you certainly don't take care of your spiritual life. So boy, it's going to hit a brick. Sorry, I almost started swearing. It's going to hit a brick wall at the 27th like this. And for those of us who are prepared, especially Taurus people, since it's getting right into those squares, those angular houses of first house and fourth house, you're going to really start coming to terms with who you are and how you are providing for the world right and all around you, so that you can actually share your soul's vision in a way that's powerful and passionate and emotional without it sounding like, you're just ranting for no reason. It's getting old, I have to say. Because and this is not a judgment. We've all been here, right? But many of us know at this point that it's getting old. And again, Taurus, you are slow to move, right? You really have to be motivated to get, to move. And sometimes that motivation can be really shocking. And it's like, has Uranus not done enough? I guess not. I don't know. So now we're going into the waxing, the first quarter moon phase and the waxing gibbous. So the big energy here, because I know we're kind of getting past the hour mark here, is I want to share with you when the moon moves into your fifth house. It moves into Virgo, and this is going to be that heart fire and your emotional connection to this. Now, the other thing that's going on during this time is that Mars sextiles Uranus. So speaking of which, there will be this moment where change can happen very quickly, right? And it's something that is sanctioned, something that is based on a conscious concern for the integrity of the world around you. So things can happen very quickly here, something spontaneous, something that is new that comes out of nowhere, and there's extra initiative and motivation to get things going. And this is a good time to break away from limiting situations coming into next weekend. And it's perfect with the moon in your fifth house, because now you're going to really start feeling that inspiration creatively to actually, put things where they belong, to actually be dedicated and have that perseverance. And Mars sextile Uranus in that moment too is going to initiate an opportunity to not only have quick and smooth change. You're going to have a desire for fun and excitement, and definitely a moon in the fifth house. You're going to want to have fun, right? You want to, emotionally, you're going to want to have fun and joy and thrill and excitement. And you get that from focusing and working at something, right? And being committed to something. So this is a great time to break away from limiting situations as you are emotionally like, yeah, I want to actually enjoy myself. Okay. So that's really great. I like that coming out of this first quarter moon, for you. So yes, the moon will come into opposition, of course, with Saturn, and then it'll come into opposition with Neptune in different ways. And yes, this is going to be sad, and you're going to have a hard time sharing your emotions. And by the way, the moon will be conjunct Alpha Draconis. And so there may be kind of this, ego satisfaction that you're trying to get, as Saturn is just like, well, there is a role that we all need to be playing right now in life. And you have to work very hard to avoid these negative feelings, okay? And that's the thing about Virgo, is that you do work hard. And you may feel burdened or guilty about these responsibilities because you just want to have this kind of ego satisfaction about working with this energy, this dynamic intensity of life. And you may feel a little sorry for yourself because you're just like, oh, I don't want to think about how society is falling apart. You're going to have to not get caught up in the morbid outlook, but you also don't want to totally avoid what's happening either. You don't want to totally put your head in the sand, but you do want to maybe embrace, again, your heart fire, your creative expression, and your song. And the great thing about it is that after that happens, as you can see here on Sunday, the moon comes into a trine with the sun, right? This is such a great transit. You're so confident and relaxed and happy, and you're going to see tangible results, right? Personal excellence, tangible results of what you're cultivating within yourself, right? This is a great moment here. And then it comes into a trine with Mercury still retrograde in your sign, and allows you to see things more clearly. Your intuition is balanced with reason and a thought process. And again, it's going to have a lot to do with the power that you are exhibiting, what you're feeling. You're going to have this sense of real power over your own expression and how that is allowing you to see very clearly the baggage you've been carrying and if you want to keep carrying it or not. I think that's something to consider as well, right? Just because shit's going wrong in society here, Taurus, doesn't mean that you have to give up on all of your dreams, your goals, your joys and aspirations and your creativity. We still need you to be creative, of course, and that means being willing to be dependable and persistent and prudent and all of the Virgo things, right? That moon trine Mercury is going to be great. So the first is when Pluto stations retrograde, and the moon will trine Uranus. And again, this is one of those moments again where you're going to find this is one of those moments where you're going to find, I just realized that I had this track on, this music track, and I've obviously been on longer than an hour. So it's moved on to some other video that I have on my downloads playlist, and it's definitely someone talking. It was so distracting. That's okay. I'm almost done here. So the moon is going to be opposite Neptune. Pluto has stationed at this point. We're still technically in the first quarter moon phase. And the moon will also have trined Uranus. So again, trusting your intuition. There is stimulation that comes from some sort of group effort that is going to be very become very obvious to us, because we're now getting to the point here, Taurus, where the moon's going to move into your 7th house with the full moon, and then it's all about your social identity and expression. So we're still working on who you are and how you express yourself. And so the moon trine Uranus is great for bringing positive change, try something new, breaking a pattern, being flexible and open-minded, all of these things with what's coming out spontaneously from you. And this has a lot to do with being stimulated by other people that you are engaged with. Now, it's going to be opposite Neptune, obviously, as you can see here, and square to Venus as well. This is going to be one of those moments where you get very, you become very emotionally sensitive. There's a lot of misunderstanding. Especially the square to Venus, like becoming an increased need for love and affection. You might get the wrong impression about something because you are kind of in this refined moment here and really trusting your innocence and simplicity as a soul. And I don't know if people are necessarily, there may be this kind of backlash against this, and people may also have a misunderstanding and you get the wrong impression based on how they're responding to you. And so you may have unconscious fears around relationship or around your involvement with society that is going to bring up, these unconscious fears. So you can become very easily discouraged. And even though you had this great weekend, basically, with the moon moving through your 5th house, so these challenges are going to stimulate some more creativity and imagination so that you're not becoming easily discouraged, or you are not indulging yourself in substitutes because you are finding it harder to get motivated or to get the relational affection that you are craving. And Pluto's going to station retrograde, and there's going to be the Mercury cazimi. So even though there's going to be discomfort and maybe some misunderstanding, this particular transit of the Mercury conjunct Sun is going to be kind of one of those moments, at least internally for you, where you're going to be like, who am I? Who do I actually want to be? Maybe I should shop for other versions of myself, and perhaps you'll have that kind of light bulb moment internally of who you are not. And perhaps these uncomfortable situations are going to give you the opportunity to actually embrace the cazimi and be like, who am I not? And if I'm not this person, who do I actually maybe want to be? And as Pluto is stationing retrograde at this moment, we're going to come into that empty fallow period with the Pluto retrograde and kind of take stock of all the destruction that has happened thus far in your 10th house of your profession or career. Now, the moon moves through Libra starting on the 2nd. And there's so many quincunxes. This is because it's all to your 1st house, because the sixth house is a natural quincunx to the first house, meaning that it's one thing to be identified and have a subjective ego. It's another to actually get to work and start maturing. So there's going to be a lot of that coming into the beginning of May, leading up to the full moon, basically. And I think that's where we're really going to end it, because the full moon lunar eclipse is on the 5th. And right before that, Venus is in a square to Neptune. I talk a lot about that actually in the eclipse reading. So I think that's something worth checking out, because this 26 to 27 degrees Gemini is going to come up a few times in the next following months. So your ruling planet of Venus in a square to Neptune is important to pay attention to, because it's going to be misunderstanding. There's going to be insecurity about the self, insecurity about what is yours, insecurity about your ability to step out of your comfort zone into the world right in front of you cognitively with awareness, especially as Neptune is like, everything is being harvested societally, right? It can be very discouraging to feel secure enough to step forward into a brand new situation when you're like, well, why bother? Everything is being just, dissolved down back into its baseline, essentially. We're in the harvest, right? So that's going to be something that is present as we're coming into the full moon, which will be if we go back a couple hours, 14 to 15 degrees of Scorpio. And that means that the moon will also be opposite Mercury. It'll also be opposite Uranus. And so as you are becoming very sensitive to who you are and who you've been in relationship, this is going to be showing where this is all going, basically. And again, it is an eclipse, but it's a penumbral eclipse, so it's not going to be nearly as distorted as it would be. So you're going to get a pretty good indication here of who you are in relationship and where these relationships are going, right? The moon in the 7th house, you become sensitive to the form of the relationship and your participation in it, who you are in it. So you get this sense of who you're becoming, and you're definitely going to get a sense at the full moon of where this is all going. And this is one of those moments, right? With all full moons, where is it going? Full illumination, right? You see that all of the impulses over the first half of the lunar cycle, you are like, yes, this is substantiated. This is actually, I have created the vessel in order to fully receive the light of the sun in my living soul. Or what cannot withstand is not going to make it. And you'll get a sense either way on the 5th of May what's happening with you, Taurus, in this way. So thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate all of you very much. You got a nice long new moon transit forecast, because this is an eclipse cycle, and Taurus, the fact that you are really the representative not only of this new and full moon, but of the eclipse cycle, makes your role exceptionally important right now. So thank you for being here, truly. I really, really mean that. And don't forget that you can link to my website in the description box below, and on my homepage are all the current offerings. There's a little button below each flyer that directs you to how to either book a reading or get more information. So if you are interested in any of the services or products that I have offered, and you want to get a jump ahead of things, now's the time, because like I said, from right after this full moon, actually, the eclipse, from the 6th to the 15th, I'm going to be off the radar completely, and it will take some time to get back into the swing of things come mid-May. So now's the time if, in fact, you want to book. And remember, I'm offering 30% off just about everything except the lunar transit forecast and the eclipse. So thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Take care of yourselves, really. Take care of each other the best you can, and may your Creator bless you in whatever direction you decide to go in. And I will see you on the next video. Thanks, Taurus. Bye.